You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. My name is Ashleigh King and I'm the founder of this podcast series. It's been running now for 3 years and we're in over 70 countries across the world. I'm so delighted that you've decided to gift your time and take some time to listen to this episode and watch it as well. I'm joined by my lovely friend Sarah today, and I was thinking just before we started, how awesome is it? My favorite rock chick and sensitive soul. So I love that complexity, which we can discuss. But hi.
Hello.
Welcome to Nurture Your Zest. And
thank you. Thank you for having me, Ashleigh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What a pleasure to have you here. And would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Sarah Seed, and I am a self-discovery coach for women. I'll explain more about that if you ask me any questions on it.
I think, I've got so many questions there because I feel like I'm on a continual quest for discovery. I think a lot of people are. Well, I think we all are. Self-actualization for me is something I'm always looking for. Yeah. And so I'm very excited to be talking about self-discovery and why it actually matters. Yeah. But I guess before we do that, why does self-discovery matter to you?
It definitely matters to me because of my own journey in life. I had lost myself completely for other people. The person that I was growing up was based on what everybody else expected me to be, who I was, how I acted, how I behaved. And I didn't know who Sarah was at all, probably until around my late 30s was when I had a realization of this Sarah is not Sarah, and who am I meant to be? Who am I? What do I really want? Where do I really want to go in life? So it's been born out of my own quest to search and seek for the answers about who I am and what I really want.
Wow, it sounds like we're going to get deep and we're going to dive in pretty much there. So, I mean, gosh, to go through your life and get to your late 30s and then think, hang on, this isn't me. That's quite a profound thing to experience, right? So I know that you and I are both spiritual folks and really appreciate that, but not everyone has that same viewpoint. But would you say that that wasn't just a paradigm shift or a discovery of yourself, but also maybe an awakening?
Definitely. I think I've had several awakenings. I think I'll probably continue to have those awakenings. But that for me was a spiritual awakening of this life that I'm living is not mine. I'm living a life for other people. So yeah, absolutely.
Wow. And so I'm really, really excited to chat to you, Sarah, because one of the things that I love that you do and that you talk about is you've got such a mission for women, you know, and for empowering women, but also that opportunity to reclaim your voice, reclaim your story, kind of lift yourself up above shame and guilt and all these things that women can often struggle with. And there's that sort of constant need to please and need to prove our worth all the time. And I think the work that you do in this space is really, really special and quite unique, actually, because what you do is you empower people to dream again and to kind of question their own reality and their own circumstances and actually give them the opportunity to say, hang on, I can create the life I want. I've got the... And sometimes that's quite scary to think about, because if you think you're set in a particular way and this is your life and you've got these circumstances and you just have to do it this way because that's what your life is, then to have the gift of going, hang on, I can create something. I mean, how does a person even start to begin with those steps? What what happens for a person to get to that point?
I completely agree. I think it takes a huge amount of courage. Courage is something that I help people develop. Just to give you a bit of background as to how I got into self-discovery was I did originally train as a life coach. So I trained as a life coach. I studied NLP. I started running these Dare to Dream workshops. That's how I kind of originally started. You know, I was on this big vision and mission to empower women to dream. And the women would come to these workshops and sit and cry, which gets me quite emotional. But they would actually say, Sarah, I don't even know how to dream.
Wow.
I don't know what I want. I'd given them space and permission to dream, and they didn't actually have a dream. And they couldn't put pen to paper. And that's when I realised that there was a big gap of you have to have the clarity of who you are as a person and what you want and what's getting in your way before you can even allow yourself to discover those dreams, if that makes sense. So the self-discovery work I do is really helping them understand themselves, their trigger points, their behaviours, their shadow traits. It's quite deep, soulful work. The sabotage, you know, all these things that hold us back, and then give them permission to dream. But they discover their dreams along the way with what I've created. It's a very unique concept called golden thread work. And so we gently help them uncover what their own golden threads are in life. I've done it as there's 7 golden threads. So there's dreams in relationships, dreams in authentic success, our home, who we are as a woman. You know, there's different areas, and we very gently but consistently help them to start to uncover that until they get to a point where they've got that clarity, that confidence, that courage to dare to dream bigger.
Wow. And just holding that space for them. I mean, that's so powerful. As you said, to run workshops where you're saying to people, come along to this workshop, you're going to dream about your ideal life, we'll create a vision board, we'll get you all excited, but to actually have people saying, I can't dream, I've forgotten how to dream, I've forgotten how to imagine or to have what I want. Is that really for me? Is that something I can really have? And that's quite profound. Why do you think that women maybe forget how to dream, or they lose those skills, or they don't believe that that's a life for them?
I think this is the bit that gets me emotional, because this is my why. This is why I do what I do. I think I do believe men can do this to a point as well, but I think we definitely as women self-sacrifice has been something that's been a big part of my own journey, of sacrificing my own needs for the sake of other people. I didn't realise how closely linked that is to being an empath, to being a highly sensitive person, but just living a life for other people, so you actually start to bury your own needs, your own desires. And every woman I've spoke to, it seems to be a journey of they lose their identity in the quest to seek approval of other people. So then they lose who they really are in that quest, because you end up doing things and being somebody for somebody else. So how can you then know what your own authentic dreams are when your life is about other people, whether that's your children, a partner, your parents, friends, society? They all have a direct impact on how we then, whether we really honour what our own needs are.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like to wake up one day and then say, hang on, this is not the life that I hoped for. That's going to create a little bit of friction. Definitely. With your family or your friends or your parents or whoever is in your life, because we have our safe space and we have our growth zones, and actually to do anything that's different is scary, you know, and it's sometimes scary for the people around us. And when we change, it forces other people to look at their own stuff.
Yes.
So what's your experience with that as you helping these women, as you were adjusting your life and creating the life of your dreams? How did that impact your own relationships?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, and something that I thought about this morning after one of the questions you asked me around belonging. For me, there's been several times in my life where in the quest to decide what's right for me, I then have lost a lot. So I was brought up in a cult.
Right.
So when I was 20, 21, I left that and lost my parents, lost everything that I'd ever known, and had to start again. So that was a very big thing. But then I kind of settled into an average life, did what I thought was expected of me, got involved with somebody, had kids, again, woke up thinking this isn't the life I want. And when I left, again, because it was my choice and I knew there was something more for me, again, lost quite a lot. And it's that belonging you lose, which is why it takes so much courage, is because you do have the potential of losing what is your safety net. The more I've grown, I've lost friends. That belonging of there's got to be deeper friendships, more soulful friendships. When I first split up from my children's dad 7-8 years ago, I lost a group of friends because it highlighted, as you said, what was unhappy in their own lives, and they didn't like it and they couldn't deal with that. So I have lost definitely a great deal by having the courage to be myself, but equally I've gained my life back. I've reclaimed my life. I've reclaimed me, and I feel the people in my life now are deep, soulful connections. So I wouldn't have it any other way. But as you say, it's a process of loss and grieving that loss as well, and then regaining some and reclaiming what you really want.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, that element of actually giving yourself the time to grieve. So sometimes we move on from things,
yes,
and we grow, but actually we miss our old self.
Yeah.
We miss the friends that we've maybe left behind, or the opinions of ourselves, or the values that we've held.
Yeah.
And so although we know it's better what we're doing, you still grieve for a time where things were different, or you thought differently, and I think that's part of the journey.
Yes.
But that identity piece that you're talking about is so important. So Sarah, now without the mask, can you see times in your life where maybe you had protection and armor to protect yourself from the big world and fit in and try to please and all these sorts of things?
Oh, definitely. I think one of the biggest things, feedback I get from women is they feel they're wearing a mask, a mask of everything's fine, or, everything's great in their life, or, being something for other people. And absolutely, I can see there were times where I put that mask on and also masked my sensitivity. I think that's been a big thing for me, really honouring that. I think I'm still in that process of really honouring that sensitivity, and what that means for me. Sensitive not in I cry easily, sensitive as in what I need in my life, how my life needs to be quite different to other people's in order to honour who I am. And people can ridicule that, people can mock you for that, but actually it's a big part of taking off the mask and saying, yeah, this is who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something about when you decide to design your life or create the life you want, you then have the choice of what you let in and what you don't.
Yes.
And one of the things that I really like about you that I know I really click with and feel so, I just love being around your energy, is that sensitivity, but also the femininity with that. So whilst you are so soft and sensitive to others, I feel that I can remember to be gentle, and I have the courage to just be me and soft, and it's safe to be soft. At the same time, there's also that safety of saying, I want this and I dream for this and I long for this thing, and it seems so outside my wildest dreams and expectations, and so there's that duality of ambition and also safety and strength and courage and grace and beauty in a different way to maybe what anybody else is doing. So I think it's really important that we do honor our values and what we feel safe with, but also grow as well. And what you've said there as well about your journey is you've grown, but alongside loss as well and grief.
There's been a huge loss in grief. I think even this year has been yet another dark night of the soul around grief and loss. But I love what you've just said around the masculine and feminine, because that is something that I do a lot of work with women. Because we live in a very masculine world. It is about drive and ambition. And I think it's healthy to have that, of course, but it is also really honouring that feminine. And to be fair, that's why a lot of relationships can struggle, is because a woman is not allowing herself to really show up in that feminine energy. So a lot of my self-discovery work is around helping a woman truly honour both sides of who she is, the masculine and the feminine sides. Men have it too. They need to honour that feminine side. So that for me has been a big part of my own journey, where I've been too ambitious and too focused and too driven, which has created, effects in my own life. So just having that balance is incredibly important. So I just wanted to just touch on that, because I think it's a really important point to make.
I think it is important, and I think there'll be people who are listening who maybe aren't familiar with some of these terms. So would you mind explaining a little bit to anyone listening or watching what types of traits, positive and negative, you might have that are linked to, say, your feminine energy or your masculine energy, and why it's important to be in balance?
So a masculine energy, the positive side of that is, as we've said, you've got the ambition, you've got drive, you've got confidence. A negative aspect could be that you're very headstrong, you could be a bully, you could be very egotistical, those kind of things. For a feminine energy, feminine positive is receptive, honouring, loving, kind, forgiving, nurturing. But a shadow feminine is manipulative, is a victim, is a gossiper, is spiteful, is cruel. So it's about understanding with compassion, with self-compassion, where our own shadow traits are. I've definitely got my own shadow traits, and I've been working on those. And it's about understanding what those are and then moving and accepting those. And I love, there's a quote that says about when you shine the light on those traits, that actually the light helps those disappear, because it's about awareness. The moment we become aware, oh my God, I'm this or I'm that, that gives you the opportunity to change. So a lot of the work has been about, actually acknowledging my own traits, my own behaviours, in order to be able to change those and become a more whole person and a happier person.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's beautiful. I love how you've explained that. And I think I only recently came to the term and understanding of the word shadow. And I think it's actually so empowering when you start to explore the parts of yourself that perhaps you've hidden from yourself. And I know there's bits about myself that I really don't like. And when I've started to journal about them, it's been painful, and there's been a lot of tears, and there's been a lot of thinking and reflecting and thinking about things that I've done in the past that maybe any of those traits you've said on the masculine or feminine side, being too pushy or perhaps acting like a victim or, gossiping, or all these different things that we can do as people, because we are all people.
Absolutely.
At the same time, I think what I find really interesting, I've been reading so much recently, and I've been reading a lot of books about anthropology and how we've changed as a society. It interests me the way we would have been without all of the noise of today. So hunting for our food, or planning and organising, remembering to, the right type of berries we can eat and how to grow crops, and the collaboration we would have had in a former society around sharing and trading and telling stories, which is what we're doing now. We're sharing stories that can really touch people's hearts and minds. And I think exploring those shadows, if we just ignore them, we actually risk losing a massive part of ourselves and
Yes.
our own story. And actually, like you say, shining the light on them helps you to reclaim your voice. One of the things that I know we both like Brené Brown.
Yes.
So one of the things I love about Brené Brown is she often talks about, and I don't think this is her original quote, it may be, she talks about going into the arena, which is really, really important. But the one that I really love is about the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek, something around that.
Yeah.
And that's what working on yourself and kind of exploring yourself means to me. It's that compassion to go, hang on, let's look at this from a logical point of view, without any emotion and without any judgment, without the shame, and actually look at the situation as if I was in the other person's shoes. That's something that I think has helped me in my journey, is that when it comes to forgiveness can be hard, but actually to imagine with compassion that the other person, try to think about it from their point of view. Gosh, that can give you so much information and so much understanding. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about here, which I think is really important, and I think you cover this in the work you do with lots of women, but sometimes in our lives we've made whatever decision we've made, and we can struggle living in shame because of whatever decision we've made. We can think about, long for closure, or long for a way to reconcile things, or forgiveness, or just that we're just constantly seeking approval for certain things. And I'm wondering, for you, have you ever experienced that, where maybe you've wanted closure, or you've wanted to find answers to something, and actually you've discovered maybe that you can find them in yourself or in reflecting on certain things?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think this does link to shame and guilt massively as well. Just when you're talking about Brené Brown, she talks about shame. And I love what she says about shame as being an intensely painful feeling or experience, believing that we're flawed or that we don't belong. So there's been quite a few things in my life with regards to that. I think shame, for one, I didn't own my story. Another Brené Brown quote is around, if you deny your story, you don't get to write the ending. And for many years, I would not even tell anyone that I'd been brought up in a cult. It was shame, complete shame around it. In fact, even my ex-partner had said to me, we never talk about it. We don't let anybody know, that's like a shameful secret. So I never owned that part of me. But because I didn't own it, I couldn't let go of it internally, subconsciously. And until I came to a real understanding and grieving and the loss of being brought up in something that was completely out of my control, being coerced into being somebody that I wasn't, and also the consequences of that, losing my parents. They've shunned me because of that, and the grief that then ensues because of my children. They don't know my children. It's a long-lasting effect. So in answer to your question around letting go, I've had to do a huge amount of letting go when it comes to not having the answers on that, and forgiving, and just being okay with that's my story. That's part of my story. It doesn't get to define me, but it is and shaped who I've become, and also the work that I do now. So I think there's been a huge journey around letting go. There's been many times that I've had to let go and maybe not have the closure or the answers that I've sought from other people. But it's always coming back to yourself and saying, am I going to let this determine the rest of my life? And it's something that I'm passionate about, that this is not going to determine who I am or who I become, or the dreams that I have. So yeah, I would say there's been a lot of heartache and loss and grief along the way. I've hit perimenopause. That's a whole new ballgame. You could have a whole podcast just on that alone. But, all of those things involve loss, involve grief. And it's just about letting things go, absolutely. And coming back to yourself and saying, okay, well, but what can I do? you know, taking 100% responsibility for life. I'm not sure if you heard Jack Canfield, but he has a book called the Success Principles. And the number one success principle in life is you take 100% responsibility for it. No shifting, no blaming, no justifying. I am responsible for the outcome of my life. That's helped me a lot to step up, I guess, and become the leading lady of my own life rather than be a victim of circumstance, which could easily have been my story.
I think that is so powerful. I know we're both fans of neuro-linguistic programming, so NLP, and one of the key principles there is, you know, everyone's doing everything they can with the resources they have at the time. And so that's helped me to forgive and to look at my own self as well. But also with what you've just said there about that principle of your responsibility, it's also about being at cause or effect and saying, I am, you know, there are some things you never, ever, ever expected. You know, you grew up in a cult. Not many people can say that. And that's something that perhaps those circumstances, you know, they may not be a choice for you. However, what you've done with your life since then is a choice. And it's those taking responsibility for the times where we have maybe been out of alignment with who we want to be. And I think that what you're talking there about taking responsibility and taking the leading lady role is massive, because how often when we've been through something horrific, and I know that both you and I in our own ways have been through significant trauma, and that can be really difficult to overcome.
Definitely.
So the fact that you're saying, you know, yes, I've had these experiences, but actually I have a responsibility to myself to be the leading lady in my life. I think that's so beautiful. And I love that you're doing that work.
And it's not easy. You know, I'm not saying it's easy at all. There's times when for everybody that's hard. But that's a lot of the self-discovery work I do, is help women move from that victim place so that they can empower themselves. Just touching on forgiveness as well. For me, forgiveness is not about the other person. It's never about the other person for me. It's about me. It's about my energy. It's about me being able to move forward in my life. So, you know, there could be some listeners that have been through some horrific things and don't want to forgive somebody. And I get that. You know, I've been through quite a bit of trauma myself. But for me, it's never about them. It's always about what I need to do for my energy and for me to blossom, for me to flourish. And that's really helped me forgive, because it's like, well, actually it's not about the other person. This is about what I need to do for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really, really beautiful, because another thing that you've touched on there is the power we give someone else when we don't forgive.
Absolutely.
So we're choosing to hold them, you know, and give them our power, and we then have a connection with them. So, you know, whether you grew up in a Christian faith or whatever upbringing you have, there's often this concept across different religions around spiritual cords. Around the energetic tie that we have to someone if we haven't perhaps forgiven them. And I think that's really powerful, that ability to go, you know what you did was really messed up, but actually if I forgive you, I'm making space for myself, and I'm reclaiming my power and my voice and my story. I think that can be quite powerful.
Definitely. And as you say, it is about that cutting the cord from them energetically, because otherwise they're always going to have that hold over you.
Absolutely. I'd love to ask you, so you often talk to me about being a highly sensitive person. We've discussed this before. I know I am someone who experiences this too. If I go into a room and there's lots of people at a networking event, I often find that I gravitate towards the people in the room who are feeling sad. Or if I'm ever somewhere and there's animals, I often really connect with those animals or children or things like this. What does being a highly sensitive person mean? What kind of symptoms do you see around that? And what are the kind of benefits or challenges of being highly sensitive?
I love that you've asked me this question, because I think this is probably where my passion is going, around really honouring what that is, and that I've actually created a free gift that I give to people around that, around what it means, and also what are some of the mistakes we then make as a sensitive person, what are the pitfalls we can fall into. I think being an empath and a highly sensitive are very different. So what you just described before is quite an empath trait of sensing people in the room that need support, need help, feeling into other people's energy, those kind of things. It's a very empathic quality. And for many years, I would have labelled myself or described myself as being an empath, which I do believe I am. But it was when I read The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron. When I read that book, suddenly my whole life made sense. Because being a highly sensitive is a little bit different than being an empath. It's we are very intensely moved by things. We have very, very deep emotions. When we feel loss on a whole different level. But when we feel happiness or joy, we feel that in a whole different level compared to people that are not on that same sensitivity. We're intensely moved by art, by creativity, by films, by, that kind of thing. We are moved to tears sometimes in those spaces. We don't like violence, we abhor, we can't stand watching anything like that. There's lots of things when it comes to being a highly sensitive that we seek meaning, we seek deeper meaning in life. We can't just settle for the average status quo. It's we seek depth, we seek soul. I want to know what somebody's soul aches for. I don't want to just talk about the weather. So I don't really do average conversations, I guess. I want to know what somebody's soul aches for. So I'm about depth and deep connection and soul connection and being very intensely moved by things. And equally, having to honour that as a person, because that can be quite exhausting. So there's a depth of processing. When I'm walking into this room, I'm seeing everything in this room. I will notice the finest little detail. Yeah. And that's actually quite exhausting when you're in different environments. You pick up on what's said and what's not said. You pick up on everybody's energy. It can be an exhausting thing. So for me, it's been learning to have a life of radical self-care.
Right.
Which is quite hard to do as a single mum to 2 children. But I've had to do that. My work day is very different to the average person. My evenings are different. My mornings are different. Probably my weekends. I've created a life of radical self-care in order for me to thrive as a highly sensitive, rather than feel disempowered, because I feel there's a lot of people that are probably in that sensitivity bracket that are quite disempowered, and don't understand the pitfalls and the mistakes we make and how to change that. And that's one thing that I'm very passionate about with my program that I take women through, is navigating all those emotions at a depth that some people will never navigate to that depth. We feel everything so intensely, and how to thrive with that. Because it can be a challenging thing to do.
I think that's beautiful. I love that you are doing that for women and for people to have that connection with themselves again. You talk about people being disempowered. I think that is a huge issue for us in this very noisy world, especially if you are, as you say, highly sensitive. Just going to the supermarket, the sensory overload of people's energy, their stuff, whatever they're dealing with, that you can feel, and the sound of the scanners and the sound of, people gossiping about their colleagues, or, going outside and seeing the homeless and feeling for them so much about what they may have been through. I can see with that why radical self-care is so important. So would you be comfortable sharing any of the ways you do look after yourself? What kind of things nurture your zest?
I think it does relate back to exactly what you've said around the guilt that we can feel when we sense somebody's sadness, or we sense, and a disempowering act for me is like when we're trying to fix people, or we try and rush in and help people, or be the helicopter parent if we're a mother. And so some of the acts of self-care for me is a huge thing has been boundaries. That's probably the biggest thing that I've had to learn. Is radical self-care to me is actually saying no to lots of things that aren't my hell yes.
Yeah.
So I have a little thing that I say to myself, is this a hell yes? It was a hell yes to get interviewed by you. So absolutely, that's why I'm here.
Oh, that makes me feel cool. Thank you.
If something's not a hell yes, then I don't do it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to teach my children to do that as well. You know, don't just do things because you think you should do them, or everybody else is doing it, or it's expected of you. Does that feel right? On a scale of 1 to 10, and I say this to the children as well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want that? How much does that feel right for you? And if for me it's at 8, 9 or 10, then absolutely, hell yes, I'm there. But if it's not, then I've learned to say no to things that aren't right for me, because I've learned the hard way. And the impact it's had then on my energy, or the wrong people that I've been around. So for me, number 1 has been boundaries. Number 2 for me, I think nurture your zest. I love what you say there about how I nurture my zest. That's changed a lot over the years. I think nature is incredibly important for me. The beach, woodland, just being out and in nature. But for me, what I've learned is to strip it all back to the one word. And for me, that's around inspiration. Mm. So if something inspires me, then I'll do it. If something doesn't inspire me, then why am I even going there? So I nurture my zest, I guess, and do self-care with what feels an inspiring thing to do. And sometimes that can be sitting watching Netflix. You know, I might want to watch something that might inspire me. But it's just whatever is going to inspire me in that moment. It could be picking up a book. I meditate daily as well. I have transition times. So this is a huge thing for highly sensitives, is to have a transition time from one activity to another. So when I do something, I then don't rush into something else. If once I drop my children off at school, I don't rush into work. I have time to transition. Yeah. And that's been a huge, huge thing for me as a highly sensitive, to have a transition from one activity to another.
I can see the value of that so much. It's something I've only recently learned. As I start to do more public speaking, I have found that recently with one event, I had 2 speaking engagements on one day, and I attended 5 networking activities the same day.
See, I couldn't do that.
2 of those activities were related to the speaking, so I was networking at those. But what I've discovered is if you're speaking somewhere, people often want to talk to you beforehand or afterwards. And I know that before I speak, I can't speak to people because I need to protect my energy so much. Yeah. And afterwards, you might have somewhere else to go to, but also you're on such a special high that you get from speaking, that really to protect that is so important, rather than giving your energy away even more. So I love that you talk about transition times, and I think that is probably a great way for anyone listening or watching to maybe reconnect with themselves and reclaim some part of their day back.
Definitely. Absolutely, because it does. It does help you reclaim what you want. In this moment, what is the right thing for me to do, rather than what is everybody else expecting of me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, on that note, that is everything I wanted to ask you, but I wanted to give you the opportunity. So you mentioned that you're talking about your wonderful program. You do help women overcome guilt, shame, find their emotional freedom, work through some really tough emotions. Is there anything you want to tell anyone about today?
I think it's exactly that my work is around releasing guilt, And I term that as me guilt, which links to shame. It's about not feeling enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. So a lot of the work is releasing that. Release the guilt, reclaim you, reignite your life. That's my tagline.
Yeah.
So let's work on your self-esteem, your self-love, your self-compassion. Let's reclaim who you really are underneath all of that, underneath all of the labels and the crap that we say defines us. And sorry to swear, but it's bullshit what we tell ourselves, you know, and what's really holding you back. And through my Courage to Be You program, it's 7 things that now I've realized over many years of coaching women, it's the same 7 cycles, one of which is self-sabotage, self-sacrifice, self-pity. They're the same things. And that's what I address and help women change that story into self-empowerment, into self-nourishment, into self-compassion, into self-love, into self-esteem, so that they can really step up into who they're here to be. In all of that, in their sensitivity, in their softness, but also in what they want in life. So yeah, that's the work that I do. And if anybody feels that resonates with them, then, you know, please reach out.
Yeah, and we'll have your links in the show notes as well. So my favourite question to everyone is always, what is your number 1 word or 1 word to nurture your zest? You might feel you've already answered that, but I have a question. Is it inspiration, or is it sensitivity? Or is it self-care? What would your 1 word be?
Oh, you've put me into the spot there.
Everyone reacts this way, and I love it because I just love to hear the reactions.
Yeah, it's because authenticity is probably my deepest core value. So I'd say for me, it's about just being yourself, your true, authentic self in whatever that is. You know, just show up as you in the world. That's the one thing that I hope to give my children as my legacy is even though she embarrassed us sometimes or whatever, or, you know, we thought she was woo-woo or she was this, she was that, I was just me. So I think authenticity / if I'm allowed 2 words, creativity. I think creativity for me is how I nurture my zest. And that for me links very much with, if you're really authentic, then you will tap in, as you mentioned right at the start around self-actualize, being in a self-actualized state, you will tap into your creativity and you will tap into your flow through being authentic. So authenticity would be my word.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Ashleigh.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest, and I've been your host, Ashleigh King. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest, as well as our website and YouTube channel. If you've liked our episode today, please give us a follow or leave a review or any comments. We love reading these. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.